On July 20th, 1973, the world's top martial artist entered an apartment and never emerged. When Bruce Lee passed away, he was just 32 years old. He was a man who could knock opponents unconscious with a 1-inch punch and who appeared more superhuman than human. However, this is the strange part. He was not discovered at home with his family. He was discovered dozing off in the 26-year-old actress Betty Ting Pei's bedroom. And for 50 years, the same story has been told to everyone: a painkiller allergy. For now, that's all. Go ahead. What if I told you all of that was nonsense? What if Bruce Lee's death was caused by the same things that made him famous? What if the perfect storm that brought him down was triggered by his need to be flawless? Because Bruce Lee did not die from an allergic reaction, according to fresh information. That simple, commonplace cause of death will compel you to reevaluate all of your preconceived notions about the guy who permanently altered martial arts. Learn the truth about what actually transpired in that apartment and, more importantly, what was kept quiet for 2 months prior to his passing. After that, you'll realize that this secret is far more complex than anyone intended. On November 27th, 1940, Bruce Lee was born yelling in Chinatown, San Francisco. It was among the wildest periods in contemporary history. His mother, Grace, had a vivid dream. She believed he would return to America, but fate had different plans, so she gave him the name Lee Junfan, which means return again. 4 months after his birth, Bruce was moved to Hong Kong. Wait until you hear about his youth if you thought yours was difficult. Bruce's early years were irrevocably altered by Japan's vicious attack on Hong Kong. He experienced street violence, ongoing food shortages, military dictatorship, and the kind of fear that alters a child's life. While other children played with their toys, Bruce was studying how to survive in a conflict zone. However, this is where the intriguing part began. At the age of 9, this child was already appearing in films. By the time he was 18, he had appeared in 20 films. Bruce had been a professional actor for years, but most teenagers were still figuring out what they wanted for lunch. However, he was unable to escape the turmoil at home. Despite his celebrity dot, his father had a serious opium addiction. The family's situation was deteriorating. Bruce was more of a street brawler than a dive bartender. He was an alien in his own society because he came from multiple families. Then something occurred that changed everything. At the age of 13, Bruce got to know Wing Chun master IP Man. Here's the catch, though. He was initially rejected by IP Man. Bruce's mother's European ancestry led traditional Chinese martial arts experts to believe that Bruce's blood was not pure. Not that he was incapable of fighting. Think about that for a second. The future martial arts star was nearly turned away by a black individual simply because he was black. Thanks to a friend, IP Man eventually agreed to give Bruce a chance. Something snapped for Bruce when he started training. He had a purpose for doing this. He couldn't stop thinking about it and grew fixated on it. Whenever he had a moment to spare, he practiced constantly. The devotion was insane, even by today's standards. But what would ultimately kill him was his need to always be the best and push himself to the edge of what was feasible. Bruce and children from another martial arts school got into a brawl on the roof. He accomplished more than just winning. The parents of one child phoned the police because their teeth were knocked out so forcefully. Bruce's mother was aware that he was headed toward trouble, possibly even jail time. She made a decision that, while saving his life at the moment, ultimately led to his demise 15 years later. The location where he was born at the Dragon's Hour, you know. He was sent back to America by her. Bruce's desire to study martial arts in the United States was not the only one. He desired to significantly alter them. And that revolution was going to get really bloody. When Bruce Lee was 18, he stepped off a plane in Seattle. His hands moved faster than most people's blinks, and all he had were dreams. While still in high school, he was hired as a live-in cook. But something he did in his spare time was going to make them loathe him for the rest of their lives. His class was open to anyone interested in learning martial arts. Black students, Asian students, white students, and Latino students are all present. It made no difference how you looked or where you were from, and you have no concept how insane that was in the past if it seems normal to you now. Traditional martial arts were supposed to be practiced only within the family in China. Bruce remarked that the idea that family members passed down hidden tactics was untrue, and that he would educate anyone who wanted to learn. This decision essentially made him a target. But Bruce didn't mind. He continued to develop his own fighting style while attending the University of Washington to study philosophy. He renamed it Junfan Gung Fu and modified Wing Chun's steps. But Bruce soon came to a realization that would permanently alter martial arts. Traditional styles featured too few techniques, were too inflexible, and were too predictable for actual combat. He thus began fusing wrestling techniques, fighting techniques, and fencing footwork. He was essentially the originator of MMA before anyone realized what it was. At the Long Beach International Karate Championships, Bruce was invited to perform. When he had the opportunity to demonstrate his abilities to the world, he genuinely amazed everyone. He began by performing two-finger push-ups, in which he supported his entire weight on his thumb and index finger. Then he displayed his well-known 1-inch punch, which could knock a grown man backwards with almost any wind-up. The audience erupted. Traditional martial arts practitioners, however, were incensed that Bruce wasn't merely flaunting himself. He was demonstrating the ineffectiveness of their previous strategies. Furthermore, some people will not tolerate such disrespect. A young Chinese martial artist named Wang Jackman enters. He was chosen to permanently stop Bruce from talking. The altercation happened behind closed doors at Bruce's Oakland school. A small number of witnesses were present, and their accounts of what transpired varied greatly. Neither government records nor cameras were present. Bruce's wife, Lena, stated that it would be finished in 3 minutes. According to other witnesses, there was no obvious winner for 20 to 25 minutes, but Bruce easily and decisively defeated Wang. Wang Jackman claimed that out of respect, Bruce refrained from using his most powerful moves, and that Bruce fought like a crazy bull, using wild and dangerous maneuvers. We can be certain of this. Bruce never discussed the altercation in public after it happened. When Wang called for a second fight in the newspapers, Bruce remained silent. He was being clever, some say. There are many who believe he was scared of losing the second round. However, Bruce did undergo a transformation following that altercation. He realized that his modified Wing Chun was insufficient. He needed to develop his fighting skills. He therefore created Jeet Kune Do, a martial art without a specific form or set of rules that translates to a way of the intercepting fist. Be like water, he said. Unrelenting, adaptable, and fluid. But being like water would kill Bruce, as he was soon to discover. The meticulous perfectionist who revolutionized martial arts practice was on the verge of making a series of decisions that would ultimately result in his own downfall. Bruce Lee woke up in his Hong Kong residence and went about his daily routine. He spent 45 minutes exercising vigorously, lifting weights, stretching, and doing cardio on his personal motorized cycle. He also practiced Jeet Kune Do. Everything appeared to be all right. It's simply another day for the most committed athlete in the world. Bruce traveled to Golden Harvest Studios late in the morning to work on the Game of Death script with director Raymond Chow. Bruce was in the process of finalizing what he believed would be his next masterpiece. However, at the time, not many people were aware of something. Bruce had experimented with cannabis, but not for the purpose of getting high. He believed it improved his martial arts skills and intelligence. Furthermore, chewing cannabis was rather common among Hong Kong's elite population. Bruce getting some that day wasn't odd. Because of this. Bruce drove to 67 Beacon Hill Road in his red Mercedes that afternoon. On the second story of an apartment there, he found Betty Ting Pei, a 26-year-old Taiwanese actress, waiting for him. It's obvious that Bruce was there to discuss the Game of Death script. However, everyone in Bruce's company was aware that Betty was more than just a performer. She shared a bed with him. Months had passed since they first started dating. And lies like that don't remain a secret for long in Hong Kong, where the celebrity culture is quite tight. Betty later stated that Bruce appeared composed upon arriving. They shared some cannabis, had sex, and discussed the film. Then it grew dark. Bruce and Betty were picked up for supper by Ray Chow. Bruce claimed he was unable to attend the meeting due to a headache, despite his desire to collaborate with the former James Bond actor George Lazenby. Things started to become intriguing at this point. Bruce's headache worsened right before dinner time, and that's when the cover-up began, which is what I mean when I say interesting. Betty gave him a medication called Equestic to aid him. Aspirin and a sleep aid were combined to create this well-liked pain reliever. He declared that he was prepared to lie down and rest. Ray encouraged Betty to bring Bruce when he felt better, and went out to dinner alone, but Bruce never recovered. Raymond contacted Betty twice from the diner to inquire about their arrival time. Betty claimed that Bruce was asleep the first time. This time, she claimed that although he was still asleep, she would soon wake him up. Bruce didn't respond when Betty crept into his room and tried to rouse him up. She shook him more vigorously. Nothing. "His name," she called. Nothing has changed. Bruce Lee was not awake, nor was he moving. Betty called Raymond because she was afraid. Upon returning to the apartment, he found Bruce still and naked on the mattress. Now imagine that you were Raymond Chow at that moment. When you witnessed your biggest star and best buddy dead in his woman's bed, no one else was around. Everyone will lose everything because of the catastrophe. Raymond did what? In this situation, he made a decision that would lead to problems for 50 years. Betty was instructed to contact her personal physician, Dr. Chu. They had to decide what to do when Dr. Chu arrived and was unable to revive Bruce. Try to maintain everyone's good reputation, or claim that Bruce is dead in Betty's room. They selected the mask. Dr. Chu worked at Baptist Hospital, which was significantly closer, but Bruce's body was sent to Queen Elizabeth Hospital, which was 25 minutes away. Instead of immediately calling the police, he took this action. The rescuers attempted CPR during the drive, but it was too late. Although Bruce Lee was pronounced dead that evening, his death in Betty's apartment was not included in the official report. It was fortunate that it was mentioned that it was en route to the hospital. In addition to concealing crucial information on Bruce's final hours, the cover-up served to safeguard people's identities. Some crucial hints that would have solved the issue decades sooner were overlooked by the investigators. Bruce Lee died from cerebral edema, which is caused by an allergic reaction to the equic painkiller, according to the autopsy report. However, that story was never taken seriously in the first place. How can the world's best martial artist be killed by a simple pain reliever? This guy had abs you could grate cheese on and was in excellent form during the height of his career. Something didn't feel right. The conspiracy theories then took off like Bruce's nunchucks. The majority of people believe that the Chinese martial arts community used dim mak, the fabled death touch, one precise blow to a pressure point that results in death hours or days later, to kill Bruce. Others claim that because he refused to pay the Hong Kong triads for their protection, they assassinated him. While others speculated that Bruce's use of marijuana and other drugs might have had a part, medical professionals disagreed. But this is the bit that really got people talking, the Betty Ting Pei incident. The news went haywire when they learned where Bruce died. Stories about women and affairs filled the news. Death threats and nasty rumors were directed at Betty. When she claimed that they were merely close friends working on a movie together, people didn't believe her. They believed that something suspicious was happening because Bruce Lee passed, away in his mistress's bed. Dealing with those stories for years was like a bad dream, Betty later remarked. Every time Bruce's name appeared in the headlines, her name was dragged through the mud. However, they failed to notice the true clues while everyone was discussing how scandalous it was that Bruce died there. Because 2 months prior, something that ought to have raised serious concerns occurred. Bruce suddenly passed out on the Enter the Dragon set, the same indications as on the day of his death: headache, lightheadedness, and edema in the brain. He was immediately brought to the hospital, where he received treatment and recovered. Now, though, is the crazy part. No actual follow-up was conducted. No long-term treatment or investigation into the initial source of the brain's swelling. Everyone continued since it was viewed as an isolated incident. However, Bruce ignored the warning that his body was giving him from that earlier fall. Then there's the surgery portion that most people are unaware of. Bruce's underarm sweat glands were surgically removed. Why? He looked fantastic since he didn't want any perspiration to appear on video. Eliminating your sweat glands can seem like a small cosmetic procedure, but it can seriously impair your body's capacity to regulate your body temperature, particularly in hot, muggy environments like Hong Kong. According to some medical professionals, Bruce has a higher risk of developing heat stroke following this procedure. However, decades passed before the actual significant advancement occurred. Everything changed when a group of kidney doctors from Spain released a research. They believed that Bruce Lee's death was so simple and commonplace that it would be humorous if it weren't so depressing. Many years later, when the Lee family tragedy recurred, many started to question whether they were somehow cursed. Brandon Lee, son of Bruce Lee, was accidentally wounded in the stomach by a malfunctioning prop gun during filming a scene for The Crow. He passed away in the hospital at the age of 28. When Lee men were at their best, 2 generations of them perished in crashes. The accident appeared too brutal to be real. Bruce's death, however, was not the result of any schemes or curses. It was about something scarier and far less significant. Bruce Lee was slain by this, and it will sound absolutely insane, I assure you. Water. The same thing that Bruce claimed about himself in his Be Like Water thesis might have killed him. Bruce Lee may have died from low blood sodium according to a study conducted by a group of Spanish physicians. It's a fancy term for excessive water consumption. I know what you mean. Water can kill you, what about it? It operated like this. When you consume large amounts of water too rapidly, your kidneys are unable to keep up. It's quite bad when your blood salt level falls too low. Your brain begins to enlarge after that. The identical cause of death discovered in Bruce's body was cerebral edema. According to the Spanish specialists, Bruce was known to consume large amounts of water, juice, and protein drinks throughout the day. He drank water constantly, especially after strenuous exercise. Do you recall the procedure in which his sweat glands were removed? Stated differently, his body was unable to adequately cool itself through perspiration. He would try to stay cool by drinking even more water because Hong Kong was so hot and muggy. Here's where everything went awry, though. He may have become overly inebriated from water for the first time during the fall on the Enter the Dragon set. His head grew larger. He became lightheaded and fainted. However, he recovered. They simply continued without investigating what had transpired. 2 months later, Bruce experienced hyponatremia once more, but this time, the swelling was too much for his brain to process. It's finished. Although it undoubtedly didn't help, Betty's equine painkiller wasn't the primary cause of his death. It was the final blow in an already perilous position. Let's work this out. A combination of his own interests led to the death of Bruce Lee, a perfectionist at heart. He got surgery to remove his sweat glands for no apparent reason, so he could become overheated. He was constantly consuming excessive amounts of water due to his obsession with staying hydrated. His rigorous exercise regimen wrecked his physique in the sweltering, muggy city of Hong Kong. After his first fall, he didn't receive the proper medical attention since he had a history of ignoring warning indications. Be like water, the fighter muttered, drowning himself in his own words. It was the sort of ironic tragedy that would make a good film, even though it actually happened. One of the most significant figures in martial arts history was lost to the world. Bruce Lee was not killed by an enemy's death touch. The triads did not cause his death. Neither a painkiller allergy nor his sweetheart killed him. He went too far and ignored his body's warnings, since he was so focused on becoming physically flawless that he perished. The most human thing you can imagine defeated the superhuman-looking man. His thirst caused him to drink too much water, which his body was unable to process. Physicians are now far more aware of the dangers of excessive drinking, exercise, and dehydration. Over time, sports medicine has evolved. We are aware of the significance of electrolyte balance, heat stroke, and hyponatremia. There was no safety net, though, and Bruce Lee was experimenting on himself at the moment. The saddest thing is that, if his initial breakdown had been thoroughly investigated, they could have noticed a pattern. They could have prevented his death. Specifically, the hero passed away at age 32. And while the truth was in front of them, people spent 50 years looking for conspiracy theories. "Do not pray for easy lives," Bruce Lee once remarked. He received what he desired. Pray to be stronger men. As time passed, the man's strength increased. However, if his own need to be flawless turns into his own enemy, even the hardest man would not last. A formidable foe did not defeat the dragon. He fell because of something as simple and significant as H2O. Sometimes being like water means drowning in it, while other times the most fascinating stories have the most mundane endings.